So welcome. And when Tamara and I were talking ahead of time about how we want to spend our time, we definitely want to talk about Calm and the meditations that you do. But we also want to talk about what it means to be a teacher and how do you be an authentic teacher. So I thought maybe we'd start with that. Because you were a practitioner first, a meditation practitioner, and all of a sudden you became a teacher. And often when people become a teacher, things change. And I remember Henry David Thoreau said, be careful of any spiritual tradition that requires the changing of clothes, or the changing of new clothes, or the buying of new clothes. And I'm wondering how you work with authenticity in your own practice and how it's been to now be heard by millions of people as a meditation teacher and how you see yourself.
So I never really sought out to be a meditation teacher. It just kind of happened. I mean, I was teaching mindfulness at schools and such, but I kind of fell into it. I did have an opportunity to think about the way that I wanted to present myself in the world, though, probably about a decade and a half before I started teaching. I think it was when I first developed a website. And that was probably about close to 15 years ago. And I had a little company, it was called Begin Within Productions, and I developed multimedia content that all kind of fell within the umbrella of mindfulness and meditation. And I wrote a bio page. And of course, you know, when you're writing about yourself, you want to project a sense of credibility and expertise. So I created this great bio and shared it with my older sister, who reviewed it. I used to share everything with her for editing purposes. And she took a look at it and she said to me, it sounds great, but it's not you. And so I kind of sat with that. Because my question, you know, to her, and that I was kind of posing at that time, was, you know, how am I supposed to project a sense of expertise and credibility in my field if I'm sharing my vulnerabilities and neuroses and the shadow parts of myself, right? And so she said, I'm going to send you a book, and you have to read it. And so she sent me a book by Anne Lamott. Are any of you Anne Lamott fans? Yeah. So I was mentioning Anne Lamott to you, Soren. Once you read her book, you're going to want her on stage next year. I promise you. I read this book. It was one of her first books called Traveling Mercies, Some Thoughts on Faith. And it changed my life, really. It totally changed the way that I wanted to project myself in the world. Because Anne writes with this humor. She's hilarious. And she has this incredible wisdom and deep, deep humility. And I read this book, and I realized that if I were to, you know, follow this path where I was going to build up this facade of all-knowingness, that I was going to be stuck there, right? And I was going to have to, you know, portray this superhuman all-knowingness and perfection, and there would be no room for me to be human. So it was really liberating to read this book and recognize that I wanted in my life to be as authentic and transparent as I could be in my teaching and in my practice.
So you changed your bio, and what kind of things did you say that was different than what you had before?
Well, I think initially the sharing was about what I'd learned. And, you know, there's this, you know, I think all of us have wisdom and suffering. And so I shared my wisdom. And in the second one, I shared some of my suffering. And so at the time, I was experiencing depression, anxiety. I've always struggled with insomnia. And so it was more a sharing of how mindfulness helped support me through my challenges, rather than sharing just how I overcame challenges in my life. And really, that offered me the opportunity to be a lot more honest and heartfelt
Yeah.
in my teachings and in
Yeah.
my practice.
And
Yeah.
so Calm's growth has been kind of crazy in terms of the numbers of people who are downloading and using, and I don't even remember the millions of downloads of the millions of people. What do you think is happening, both that's drawing them to Calm, that's drawing them to conferences? What do you feel like, in particular, Calm's situation, why are there millions of people now waking up to your voice on meditations? What have you found from getting to know that community and doing this for some time?
Yeah.
What people are seeking?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a bunch of reasons that we have done so well as an app. I think one of them is Alex Tu and
Alex
Michael
and Michael
Acton
are awesome.
Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like incredible visionaries. I've learned so much from them. They have such a strong vision. They've hired so well. They're so passionate, and they've built this amazing team. So that's one of the reasons why. I think people are looking for tools to help them navigate this insane world that we live in. We're having more stress and anxiety than ever before. And I think also, the first few years we went really heavy on meditation and mindfulness. That's where I came in. But over the last couple of years, we've been really building out our sleep content. And there's so many millions of people who have insomnia, myself included. It's been a lifelong challenge for me. And, we're talking a lot about trauma in this conference. And there's a huge correlation between trauma survivors and people with PTSD and sleep issues, because our nervous systems are imbalanced. So I think we've kind of hit a sweet spot with sleep because, we've a lot of, our offering continues to grow. We have meditations on sleep, we have sleep stories and music, and I mean, it's amazing. I receive, honestly, I wouldn't believe the stories of transformation if I wasn't receiving the emails. And there's people that are writing, sharing that they are getting off of sleeping pills after being on them for years, and parents thanking us that their children are sleeping, and it's really amazing.
And what do you do? Is it that you're guiding people to be aware of their breath? Is you're guiding visualizations, or all of it? Or is there a particular intervention or offering that seems to be touching people the most?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I mean, I think that the meditations and the sleep stories are the kind of key pieces. With the meditations, they're basically relaxation meditations. We have a whole bunch. We just launched some more in the app that bring people to the present, because part of why we can't sleep is because our minds are overactive, right? So the meditations will help keep people present and help relax them when they go to sleep. I think meditation in general is incredibly helpful for insomnia, because another part of the reason why we have insomnia is because when we can't sleep, we become reactive, and then we get stressed about not sleeping, and then that makes it more impossible to sleep. So, meditation in general is an incredible tool for insomnia. And then the sleep stories are these soothing tales that we tell people. They're kind of like bedtime stories for grown-ups, right? And people are able to relax into these stories. And again, it brings us into the present. So, I recently had a conversation with someone who I shared that I was sharing that I struggled with insomnia, and they said, well, it doesn't really make sense to me, like that.
You're a meditation teacher.
You're a meditation teacher, and you're helping millions of people go to sleep, and you struggle with it. But from my perspective, it's like that's exactly why it makes sense, right? Because I think I have a really good sense of what people need. And that goes back to that authenticity piece. And I think in the early days, the meditation teacher was somebody who didn't have any problems. And they would pretend that for a few years, and then all the shit would hit the fan. And then they would be outlawed or exiled. And so I feel like we're trying to model a different type of teacher. And that's also what I feel like we've been also conversations. How do you navigate that path so you are authentic? You don't have to have a closet full of secrets, but you're also holding a certain space and also being able to guide people. I think, it's really a dangerous thing, I think, for teachers to live in the expectations of other people's idealizations, because it leaves them no room to be human and sufferers and students, which we are. And we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to say the wrong thing sometimes. I think that there's kind of a responsibility within teachers to make sure that we're practicing in a way that feels authentic and gives us that room to be human.
And so what are some of your practices now? I know there's practices you're teaching, but what are some of the practices? I know gratitude was a practice you moved into, and I'm curious, what are some of the practices you're most drawn to now?
Yeah, so I would say Vipassana is my primary meditation practice. It's changed somewhat since Calm. I think my interpretation of practice, I think that since becoming a teacher, I'm a little bit more flexible in my practice. I was so hardcore before. I think I'm just a little bit more compassionate and want to make sure that the practice is accessible to people. So it's changed a little bit. In terms of my gratitude practice, it's, gratitude was a real challenge for me for most of my life. I come from childhood trauma, and I feel that most of my life, for decades, there was a lot of struggle. I didn't really have a lot of career success until very late in life, and a lot of financial instability, and I had physical issues, and so there was a lot of anger and resentment and fear, and the feeling of it's me against the world. So in that space, there's not a lot of room to be grateful. So, it was a really deliberate choice to choose gratitude. And I think it's only because of my practice that I recognized how important it was for me to develop gratitude, because I had so little of it. And so, so I had to work really, really hard. And I had a good friend of mine who, have you listened to our sleep stories at all?
No.
Okay, you have to listen to them.
I will.
So one of my best friends is named Chris Advinson. He writes some of my favorite sleep stories. And his gratitude practice has always been incredible. I've known him for over a decade. And so he helped create this little game that we would play that I share in a gratitude masterclass that I created for Calm. And it's called Gratitude Countdown. And basically the way it works is that anytime we want, we would call out Gratitude Countdown. And the person... You're texting or? No,
Okay.
Generally when, we go for a lot of walks and that
person.
sort of thing.
Okay.
So it's always in person or on the phone. And we basically do a count off 10 to 1, and the other person has to list 10 things they're grateful for. And so this became a regular part of our friendship. And I also did it on my own, where I would, challenge myself to come up with 10 things that I was grateful for. And when you feel like there is nothing to be grateful for, it is really, really hard. And so you kind of go through the motions, and you say the words, and they don't mean anything, but you still say them. And after a while, it began to change, and I began to feel the words, and my practice began to shift. And basically my relationship with life really changed. I never really thought about gratitude as being like a part of my practice before. And it's really over the last 5 years that I would say that it's grown, and as I've committed to it, it's really strengthened.
Right. We've had Eckhart Tolle here a few times, and one of the things Eckhart says, I don't think he meditates actually, he might, but somebody probably knows. You just live in the now. This is the only moment we have. Everything else is an illusion. The story we have about the future, the story we did about this morning that we've meditated or whatever, just be in the now. And
that's so easy, isn't it?
It makes so much sense. And he had his own different doorway experience where it seems like there was an experience that kind of like cleaned up a lot of things that don't keep coming back. For most of us, there's a practice to keep that quality of awareness present right? And so how do you help somebody navigate if they're like, what do I do? Like there's 10,000 different meditations, headspace, calm, Buddhist this, Buddhist that. How do I find a practice? What do you tell people if they're seeking a practice that helps them navigate that and helps them cultivate presence, knowing that there's so many different options and opportunities?
Yeah, that's
And what
a
do you
really
find
good
yourself?
question.
What do you find yourself saying if you get that from people who are like, where do I start?
Yeah, so in life, I think, I don't know that I've actually gotten that question too often, but, I think in life, for me, I just went to a ton of different centers and tried a lot of different practices to find the one that resonated.
Yeah.
I think now, it's so much easier now. We have, now that we have mindfulness apps and now that we have meditation centers popping up like Starbucks,
Yeah.
right? When I started 30 years ago, there were a few centers, and they weren't necessarily the ones that that landed for me. So it was a lot of, it took me years and years and years to find my practice. I think that we have to find a practice, and we have to find a teacher that resonates with us. Within the app, we teach, I teach mindfulness, meditation, and a lot of our teachings are Vipassana-based, insight based, because that's my practice. But I've also studied Shambhala and Zen, and so I bring a lot of that in. Anything that's aligned, right? And it all comes back to coming to this moment, because the challenge with our overwhelm and stress and anxiety is that it's here and it's here. We're either in the future or we're in the past. And so it really is a simple and incredibly challenging thing to keep returning to where we are now. And, coming back to insomnia, we don't sleep because we're over here or we're over here. And so this is where we find peace.
So I was wondering, we just have like 2 minutes left. Would you guide us in a short practice to end?
Sure, yeah.
All right, we're yours.
Throw it on me. All right. So find a comfortable position and close your eyes. Lengthen your back and rest your hands where they're comfortable. You can cup them in your lap or rest them gently on your knees. And just start by coming to the breath and maybe taking a few really long, deep breaths. Just connecting the mind and body. So you're elongating each inhale. Releasing each exhale slowly. Just feeling yourself grounded in your seat. And on your next sigh, just feeling your body relaxing. And you can relax your breath so it feels natural and easy. And perhaps focus your attention on the area of the lungs and ribs. And just notice that with each inhale, the lungs expand. And then soften on the exhale. And the ribs widen on the inhale. And with each exhale, just feel a sense of softening. And just see if you can stay focused on each breath. Coming back over and over to the sensation of the breath as it flows through you. From the very moment the inhale begins until it releases and transforms back into an inhale. And just widening your attention so that the breath fills the whole body, feeling relaxed and stable and grounded. And then just bring your awareness back to the room, hearing sounds. And wiggle your fingers and toes. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Wow, thank you.
I didn't know how long. We didn't plan that, so
Yeah, there
I
was
didn't
no
know
timer.
how long you wanted me to go for.
I don't know, it was timeless.
You
It
said
was
a few
timeless.
minutes, so.
You did perfect. I was
Yeah.
like, needed that, so thank you so
Okay,
much.
good.
Thank you for taking the time and
Thank you,
sharing with
thank
us.
you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.